Hello and welcome to the War Report. We have a very, very big episode today, mainly analytical, covering the big two summits, the G7, of course, over the weekend, and the one that just concluded a short time ago, the big North Korea summit in Singapore that, everyone wanted to happen, but no, we thought it was going to happen. I mean, I thought it was going to happen, but I'm vindicated. That's aside the point. But yeah, it went off without a hitch today. Very positive, except of course, there's the people there who want to paint this as bad, like we're capitulating, like we're propping up a dictatorship, like that's anything new. But I think it went great today. So let's jump right into the G7, get people warmed up. So, of course, we had the G7 meeting. For those you don't know, it's the group of seven, formerly the group of eight, after the exclusion of Russia, and then they voluntarily withdrew themselves, which I'll get into, which is the seven top economies. That's what technically is. It was formed back during the Cold War and, of course, grew into the new post-Cold War neoliberal order, as most of these organizations have, like NATO. But it was in Canada this year, and the head of government of the host country is in charge of scheduling what topics they're going to be talking about, the meetings, what order they're going to be talking about. And, of course, it was none other than Justin Trudeau. I know you, as a Canadian citizen, will be very familiar with him and probably have very strong opinions. I know I do. And it was a very tense meeting in many regards, because you had Trump pushing on this trade war, him talking about, oh, we need tariffs, we can't let our country be taken advantage of. You have the Canadians and the Europeans saying, oh, no, we must stand by free trade. We must stand on our principles. We must stand with our allies and cooperate. Trump's isolating himself, while failing to mention how much they tariff our goods. But that's aside the point. And the media, the mainstream media, really wanted to paint this like Trump is faltering, like he's a bad diplomat. And, he's just a laughingstock, how they've been trying to do ever since 2015. I know the audience of this show probably has various opinions of Trump, but we got to admit the media isn't necessarily the kindest to him, and I definitely have my criticism, but I'm willing to give him credit where credit is due. And they're trying to make him a buffoon. We've all seen the picture. It's been memed to death of him and Merkel facing off. Well, that's interesting, because if you look at different camera angles on that, you see the fact that he's actually talking to Macron, and I believe it was actually on the topic of trade. And Merkel is just kind of inserting herself in the picture, since she knows that the pictures will be taken that way and different camera angles will be shown. So she just kind of inserted herself. And, of course, Trump and Merkel, their feud goes on because, ever since Trump got elected, Merkel's been trying to establish herself in Germany as leader of the free world, while, her popularity is faltering amongst her own people. But that's aside the point. It's just laughable to think, Germany is the world leader. But you'll notice the G7 wasn't,
and led by a woman. And led by a woman. Take that, bigots.
Yeah, this is peak neoliberalism here, but what a lot of people are ignoring, a lot of people who just kind of pay attention on the periphery, is the fact that it was very divided. It was almost half and half. You had Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, Conte, the newly inaugurated Prime Minister of Italy, siding with Trump on more issues than not. And you had Merkel, May, Macron, and Trudeau on another side. So it was a 3-4 split. And in fact, it would be a 4-4 split if Russia was still part of the organization, because Trump and Conte both said they would be willing to readmit Russia. However, the Russians said that they have no interest in, cooperating with the G7 after how shafted they feel by them, and would rather cooperate with Eastern powers, which, frankly, I can't blame them. But, point being, is Trump has not isolated himself, he's repositioned himself. We kind of talked about this on last episode, how America's a phoenix rising from the ashes. It's losing influence in some parts of the world, but it's gaining respect and influence in other parts. We position ourselves. We have made friendly with these anti-EU leaders like Conte and like Orban, and we've made ourselves friendly with leaders like President Moon of South Korea and Prime Minister of Abe, or Abe, I'm not sure, I've heard it pronounced both ways, of Japan. So I think things at the G7 turned out pretty well, and I think it's actually kind of funny because a lot of the panels, a lot of the were, because Trudeau organized them, were based on these just useless wedge issues, like, oh, we're going to talk about X, Y, or Z. We're not going to talk about economics. We're not going to talk about security. We're going to talk about gender representation in some arbitrary category. And funny thing is, that's the one Trump showed up 25 minutes late to, and he did snub them at like those kind of meetings, and which again I support. So I just think it was kind of funny. What's your take on it as a Canadian and as an Eastern European?
Well, I'm very pleased with the way Trump handled himself. I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, obviously. I think there's a lot that we can read into this. I do think it's interesting that Trump mentioned that he thinks Russia should be back in the G7, and that Italy, who is trying to form stronger relations with Russia as well, um, should side along with America and Japan. I mean, I would be hesitant to read too much into it, however, because I do think all of this weighs on Crimea. That is, um, Trump is dangling a carrot um, to Russia, and Russia is not. I don't think Russia is going to go for it. But all else considered, I think Trump handled himself very well. I think Trump went in with a kind of bluster that a lot of us expected, but I think he's doing that to keep everybody guessing as to what he's going to do. He's also going to ask for too much at the start.
I mean, that's basic negotiation. That's
Yeah,
that's Trump's style.
but wildly so, and he's going to hope for something more than halfway that suits him. Um, I would say that America is also, like you say, it is going through some really fundamental changes. I think the way the war has turned out in Syria and the situation in Ukraine means that whatever the plans were before Trump got elected as to how Russia was going to be castigated or integrated into, the Eurosphere, has changed. And I see, and in a way, Obama already started this Pacific pivot back in 2011. And in many ways, Trump is still continuing with that pivot, albeit according to the way he thinks it should go. But the tariffs also for the European powers, the Western European powers in Canada, I think they act almost as a sort of like a sanction,
Well,
in a sense that there's still at this threat level. There's still yeah, go ahead.
It actually is funny though, because you look at it, Trump comes out and makes a statement saying, yes, I support free trade, but it's obviously that, our Canadian and European allies don't. And, I would be willing, if they drop their tariffs, I'll drop my talk of tariffs. So at the end of the day, it just seems like he's using it as a bargaining chip, just as a wedge. I don't think he's really serious about these tariffs, but you know what? I do err more on the free trade side. I know that actually contradicts a lot of people like within our sphere, but I think he's doing a good job with, because it does scare them. It makes them shake in their boots. At the end of the day, maybe I'm being a bit of a, American centric. Maybe I'm being a bit arrogant. The way I see it is these countries need us more than we need them.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Trump was clever to say create this position for himself by saying that I'll drop the tariffs if you will. Of course, they're not going to do that. And also, we shouldn't forget that Western Europe is heavily dependent on an American military.
Oh yeah. Germany only has four.
America is 75% of all NATO costs. There's another tea leaf you could read into this, is that America is scaling back, and it's trying to find a way to scale back, a strategic way. And I think the way Trump is not giving them an idea of, a clear idea about what he's going to do is actually a good strategy for this. So this is why I think he was successful in the EU, but sorry, in the G7. It is because I think he understands that there's going to be monumental changes. And even in his campaign, everybody had this idea, the so-called isolationist idea, but it's not really. It's about reprioritizing where America goes. And, basically, it's unprecedented in terms of recent American history, the way Trump spoke to these other Western European G7 powers.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean,
uh,
I think it was Macron who ended one of the meetings by saying, "Well, if you're going to be that way, I guess we can just go back to being the G6 because I mean that's actually how they originally started." So, but yeah, he
mhm,
was basically threatening to exclude Trump from the organization, which of course that would never happen. But another thing about like the exclusionary thing, and I want to bring this back to Russia. Now, Trump obviously is not entirely in power. There's the bureaucrats who've spent their entire career in there, who've been in there since like, Nixon, Ford. Of course, they're going to have the anti-Russia policies. That's the driving force behind a lot of our wars abroad or actions in Syria or actions in Ukraine. But I believe Trump genuinely does want to try to at least reconcile things with Russia to the point where we're not in a second Cold War. So I think this reaching out was kind of that and kind of like all they would let him do. And another interesting thing I saw at the summit is I saw John Bolton there. Now, I'm starting. I
mhm.
look. I don't like John Bolton. I never have, and I probably never will unless he comes out and does complete 180 tomorrow. But I think his hiring was forced in a sense. So I'm not saying Trump is a puppet, but I'm saying every president, no matter who they're elected, they're never going to be completely in control. There's always going to be interests they're beholden to. I think
Yeah.
he's also there just as a rabid junkyard dog, but at the end of the day, he's on a chain. He's there because he looks scary. People associate him with the Bush wars, and then at the end of the day, Trump is still going to keep him on that chain, on his leash, and I think that's why he brought him to the G7 because you had the this complete firebrand there, this guy people around the world think is a lunatic, and you're bringing him to negotiations with your ally. So I think Bolton is somewhat strategic in that sense. That being said, I still don't like the guy, but I just thought that was a bit of an interesting observation.
Yeah, I would agree. And Pompeo,
Pompeo
Pompeo,
has
and
been a pleasant surprise, which we'll get into when it comes to North Korea. But yeah,
yeah, I mean that's their purpose. They're both junkyard dogs, the two pit bulls in the Trump administration, just to raise the fear level a bit. It's funny because Europe is looking more and more isolated. The decades of the way it's been able to maintain its prosperity without having to invest in its military in the same way that America has, is quite telling because I mean, Russia may say, "Well, you snubbed us, and we're not really interested in rejoining the G7," and there may be truth in that. However, I think Russia is, denying the offer or not playing with the idea in a serious way indicates, in a way, how isolated Europe is.
yeah. I mean,
Not the reverse.
it, it's it,
But I think
it's
Russia is serious about its Eastern partnerships, and I think the other reason Trump wants to make a form some kind of strong relationship with Russia, or a better relationship, if not strong, is because I think that the partnership between Russia and China is actually a very strong one. And it has moved considerably in the last 4 to 5 years. It's
and it's
not,
become almost like a
it's not
codependent thing.
pardon me?
It's become almost like a codependence between the two.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, France has actually, by a small number, more nuclear missiles than China does. And they're at least a generation or two more up to date. So, in a sense, Russia acts as the military for China's economy. And maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think there was an idea that Russia could be intimidated, the partnership could be quelled, and I guess we can talk about this later in reference to Korea and about the pivot to the Pacific, why the Pacific is going to probably be more important now, rather than the Middle East and Eastern and Central Europe for America.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And with just like the rise of Russia, it's not really a surprise. Like I said, the reason Russia is a re-emerging power is because of our arrogance and stupidity and the dumb moves we made. Not necessarily the dumb moves we made, but like the strategically dumb moves that we made that benefited a very few certain set of people. They made
Mhm.
out like bandits on that, quite literally in that case. But what I also found interesting was amongst this G7 talks, there's been proposition. I'm not sure whether it's confirmed that Trump and Putin are going to meet in Vienna, which again Austria is one of those countries which has joined more the anti-EU Eurosceptic bloc, along with Italy, Poland, Hungary, and the rest of them. So I thought that was interesting
Yeah.
because yeah, a lot of people were really blackpilling Trump, like especially like around April after the Syria strikes, and a lot of people at this point, like late 2017, gave up on the fact that we're gonna get along with Russia, or at least decrease hostilities, and that's just kind of gonna stay status quo. But I think it's really coming around to the point where Trump actually is trying to make that outreach to Russia, where he actually is trying to talk to them, not necessarily saying we're going to be best friends and allies, but let's stop this Cold War before it goes back to nuclear and missile testing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 4 years ago, when I was looking at what was happening in Maidan in Ukraine, I was already aware of the growing relationship between China and Russia, and I thought, the West has had this on their plate, for at least the last 10 years, and that is either incorporate Russia more along Russia's terms into the European sphere, or Russia is going to go with China. And Trump may be trying to, I don't, wedge is the wrong word, but I mean, it's just makes strategic sense on America's part to, even if only being a mediator or between Russia and China, America will need that going forward, because I think Russia and China together are actually they have a momentum, and it's not slowing down. So a lot of the forecast that Brzezinski was giving back in 2015 and 2016 has been, was like, well, what's Russia going to do? China's just going to swallow it up. But that's not really happening, and it's not happening in a way that Russia feels threatened anyways.
Yeah, I mean, China doesn't
So
have
yeah,
the
I would agree with you
military
that
capability to
America
swallow up
is
Russia.
looking. Sorry?
I said, yeah, China doesn't have the military capability to swallow up Russia, which is why they're focusing on economic, whether it be like in, South America or East Africa or place in Southeast Asia. But I think it's also interesting because China has weaseled itself into a win-win situation. They're on good terms with the U.S. in terms of economics. They're on good terms with Russia in terms of military. So if U.S. and Russia go head to head, I'm not even talking necessarily World War III, but a second Cold War, they're going to be kind of the bridge. And whoever comes on top of that, they're going to have a very friendly relationship with and are going to reap the benefits of that. So at the end of the day, China is the real winner when it comes to this weird game of geopolitical chess. I think it's amazing how they've just positioned themselves like this so subtly too. Nobody really pays attention to the fact that China is like right there in between us, and they have us, they have Russia, we try to go through them to talk about North Korea. And another prediction I do have, I think, okay, I know India superpower by 2020 is a bit of a meme, but honestly, if India goes in like the more authoritarian nationalist direction they're going in, where it's more of an iron fist leader who can consolidate the many groups there who infight and make it actually into a strong state led by one person, I think India will start to take the role China has in U.S. foreign policy for the next couple decades, to the point where it's Russia and China and versus the Indian U.S. in a more or less geopolitical sense. And I don't know, maybe the reconciliation with Russia does work. Maybe we, find ourselves into a weird position where, we don't really share any interests, but we don't have opposing interests. So we just kind of have to work around each other, but don't really oppose each other. But that's really my thoughts on the G7 and the Russian situation, and just this side of the big news this week. So if you have any final thoughts before we get into Korea, you can go ahead and.
I think I've sort of summarized as best as I could what I think is happening, around the peripheries of the G7 meeting. It is a moment that has arrived sooner than I thought it would, but we are here. So you can see that Russia is slowly back in the good, it's very slowly and emerging in the good books of at least um, for some European countries. And the EU is growing in division. So yeah, that's all I have for the moment.
Yeah, that's all I have too. So let's get into the big news this week. So I'm sure all of you remember when the American so-called anti-war left wing just love to talk about how Trump's going to get San Francisco nuked, or the North Koreans are going to launch a bunch of missiles at California, so on and so forth, because he's just so aggressive with Kim, and it's going to be World War III. These same people who still want to go to war in Syria, which is going to provoke Russia, but again, that's aside the point. And then all of a sudden, Trump gets his summit. They're like, oh, it's not going to happen. And then he backs away. Trump, gets the summit back, less than 12 hours later. And they're like, oh, it's not going to happen. We've made too many concessions to Kim. We look weak because apparently now, anti-war leftists care about looking weak on the world stage, are embracing their roots as, neoconservatives. I don't know. Try to wrap your head around that one. And I just thought that was kind of a bit of a...
I thought that was hilarious. There was this whole hubbub today on Twitter about how dare the North Korean flag be placed alongside the American flag. It's amazing, the neolibs, how patriotic they can become on in a moment's notice if it's Trump. I mean, literally right now they will take the opposite of any position that Trump takes.
Yeah, I mean, he could cure cancer.
I was even watching France 24 today. Pardon me?
I mean, he could cure cancer, and they'd complain about how he didn't cure AIDS or anything, and that makes him, whatever.
yeah. The other criticism is Kim won. No one but Kim has been able to get this meeting, and he won. We let a dictator win. It's such a narrow-minded idea about not only about America and America's sordid history, but what our current situation is right now. It's amazing that they now raise up this, the American ideal of the American mythology of democracy.
Yeah, when any other time, it's like, oh, America's so bad. We should be more like insert other, white Western first world country here. We should be more like Canada. We should be more like Sweden, so on and so forth. But I do just want to give a general summary of the summit before I get fully into it. So around midnight Tuesday morning here, which like about the beginning of today, and Trump begins a summit in Singapore because they're about 12 hours ahead of the Eastern Coast. I time zones kind of confuse me, so I'm kind of working through this in my head as I go. But he gets there. It's very friendly. He gets his photo op. He gets his, handshake with Kim. They have the press conference, which I can't remember, but it was one of these other lamestream journalists yelling at Kim, "When are you gonna denuclearize? When are you gonna denuclearize?" And it was just pathetic. And it's just like trying to catch Trump in a gotcha moment. And really, what they did is what they've been doing for about the past few months. They've been giving Kim Jong-un what I like to call the Mohammed bin Salman treatment, where you just take this detestable person. Now, I don't oppose the summit. I can still admit he's a terrible person, but again, we got to negotiate with terrible people. That's just the way things are. But yeah, they take this terrible person, they paint him as just, this figure. Oh, look at how great he is. Look at, try to paint him the best light possible while he's just committing these atrocities. And really, it's pathetic. But
oh yeah.
So they arrive there. They have their initial press conference. They have the lunch, which they list the menu, which was no surprise, all kinds of things that most people can afford with their yearly salary. And then they actually start signing treaties. Basically, what it was commitments to denuclearize, all the usual stuff, which we got to admit was all negotiated ahead of time, probably negotiated a few weeks back. And then just the, formal signing is for show, and theories on really about the summit. This entire thing is theater which I don't agree. Again, I still support it, but Pompeo meets with Kim Jong Un. Wasn't back in like late March or so. Do you remember that? Back when he's still CIA director.
I do, yeah. I mean, I don't.
Yeah. They
It's been some
meet
years
there.
back,
There
but
was
I do
probably,
remember when he. Sorry, go ahead.
but it, yeah. So Pompeo, a few months back director when as Secretary of State Richardson was fired. North Korea has meetings with Kim Jong Un, probably saying, "Look, you can either come to the table, we can be nice, we can have fun of it, or you could face imminent American invasion." Well, it's recently been also traveled to China within the same amount of time, so he's probably basically to stay out of the way us more than we need you. We will take action on North Korea no matter what you say, which in turn probably get the Chinese to push Kim into the summit because I mean there was a Chinese delegation there, and there's no way there couldn't have been. And yeah, that's basically the whole timeline of the summit. It was really just all for show. It was just the formalities and the smiley handshakes and the signings and the press conferences. Again, great PR victory. I hope it'll lead to future improvements, but I actually was listening onto why I think that would be. Oh, my internet. I'm going to refresh and keep them entertained real quick.
Oh, I guess I'm on my own. What do you guys think?
Sorry about that, everyone. How am I now?
You're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry about the jumping out, but like I said, mainly this was all just show. It was all, just for the hugs and good feelings and the handshakes and the smiles. Again, I think it'll lead to future progress. And here's my reason being. Sunday, listening to an interesting thing from the Caspian Report, which is actually one of the places I get a lot of my sources from when it comes to this show, a lot of the reports and stuff. Very great channel. You should check them out. And they're talking Korea has been this.
Hello?
And it's been Russia, the Mongols, and that history of occupation. It's been that the only way they against the new polar world. Oh, how about now? Okay, we should be good now. I just
Hello? Yeah,
Hi.
That's great. Hi.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Hello. Technical difficulties. Hello. We just got. I'll try to improve this next. Yes, I was listening. What was that?
No, you're loud and clear. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. I was listening to an interesting thing from the Caspian Report. Like I said, I get a lot of news sources from there, especially for the show. The good. And they were talking about how all throughout Korean history that they have been invaded and occupied and ravaged because of their strategic positioning near the Sea of Japan and near China and near Russia, and of course back in the days of the Mongol Empire. So that, yeah. And they were talking about how the reason what's really been spurring on this Korean unification is a long time coming, because with a shifting world order, the Korean people as a whole, both in North and South Korea, feel threatened, feel that they need some kind of unification, not necessarily like formally, but they need some kind of cooperation and unity to weather this out, which I thought was interesting because a lot of people who are in favor of unification, which surprisingly enough is the majority of South Koreans, especially the youth, are no longer in favor of unification. They feel that there's been too much of a split already. But a lot of people compare it to Germany, but there's going to be issues if they do pursue some form of reunification, because South Korea is 40 times more prosperous than North Korea. And, people who talk about the German model, the West Germans were only 3 times more prosperous in terms of GDP than the East Germans. And to this day, West Germany and their economic resources are still making investment into the former communist regions in Germany. So reunification, people who are talking about that, they are way too white pill. I think they got to be knocked down a notch, be brought back to reality. But yeah, like I said, I could see some weird confederation status arising between the two, the two Koreas, to the point where, yes, they will cooperate. They'll try to form some form of integrated military. But I mean, even like, if you remember back to the Olympics, like back in February, 3-4 months ago, they had a hard enough time forming a hockey team between the language and cultural barriers. So imagine trying to do this, for the 24 million people in South Korea, and I think it's like 15, 20 million in North Korea. I'm not sure on the exact but the point is, you're bringing two groups of tens of millions of people together who've been separated for 7 years, to the point where things have been so divided, the fact that the average North Korean, my apologies, is 3 inches shorter than your average South Korean. So,
incredible.
At the end of the day, there's a weird paradox around this. You can reunify and create all the tensions and around that, which of course for the North Koreans that agree to any form of reunification, even just like a confederacy, American troops are either going to have to be scaled back or completely leave. The only reason South Korea and Japan are allies now is because of the common alliance with America. So if America starts to scale back its military relationship with the South Korea, which would presumably be the senior partner in this, Japan and South Korea would have no reason to be allies, and it would create a bit of a tri-rivalry in Asia between Japan, China, and Korea. But then you have the option where they don't reunify. The Korean Peninsula is under the same situation, where it's just going to be subjected to foreign domination, and until the end of time, you're going to have the Chinese dominated North, Russians dominated North, because Russia has expressed interest in getting involved in these negotiations, and the Western dominated South. So a lot of people are getting way too excited about this. They're viewing it as a lot more than it is, which is basically a PR meeting. And I'll let you put your 2 cents in on this, but I want to get into my criticism of the neocon soon. So, if you have any thoughts on it.
Well, I think we're the media and the administration, which is not unusual, is using this, the possibility of reunification of Korea in a similar way as to Germany's reunification after the fall of the Soviet Union. It would be another feather in the cap, but a lot has changed since then, and it's a different America and it's a different world. What happened after the fall of the Soviet Union? Many lessons were learned, and many of those lessons were learned by Russia as well. And I'm very sure that North Korea is anxious to hear, what they should be skeptical of when it comes to, say, a large American role in the reunification of Korea. Because if there is one, America's role will be huge. However, that said, I don't know how active. I mean, America will be active in it, but should it happen. But I don't know if the scale will be the same, only because so much has passed since then that we're not starting with a clean slate the way we did in the early 90s. That's not happening. And there's already too many lessons and too many examples for reunification of Korea to proceed exactly the way it happened with Germany. And over and above what you mentioned, the many real changes that have occurred between North and South Korea over the last
I mean,
60,
think
70
about how
years.
much Russia and China are going to be going to, on North Korea's solid side when it comes to just the negotiations for something as much as a confederacy or a loose alliance.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree. North Korea has been for both Russia and especially China this buffer state, and maybe that's why there's a surreality about Korea and always has been. You have during the Clinton administration the selling of nuclear power plant plans, um, very odd things that don't make sense. You know, but I suppose when it's a small buffer state, it acts in a much larger role, the way some countries can punch above their weight. In a way, North Korea's importance was inflated primarily because of the role that it played for both Russia and China. And um, there's so a lot of this kind of mystery about North Korea, I think, has to do with that because there is a kind of Dennis Rodman it was a spokesman for peace. I mean, that is so weird.
I definitely think he deserves the ambassador slot once we open up formal diplomatic relations. Just saying.
Yeah, and he's really genuinely crying. I think he meant it when he said he couldn't go home for 30 days. But I mean, that's got to be part of deep state, part of intelligence. What is Dennis Rodman? Why Dennis Rodman? So there's a kind of real surreality about it, and in a way, Dennis Rodman going to make peace in a way shows just how different America was in the 2000s in comparison to the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I mean that's so far my 2 cents about North and South Korea.
But I mean, I really have no opposition to what you just said. I find myself in complete agreement, and but yeah, I mean, it's been billed as the Hermit Kingdom. Basically, the Hermit Kingdom has just been a Soviet, later Russian, and Chinese client state to keep U.S. influence at bay on the Korean Peninsula. Let's not kid ourselves here. It actually, all those inside North Korea documentaries I find interesting, but at the end of the day, like I said, like you said too, it's just a buffer state. It's there to, it's China's meat shield, basically. And it's, Chinese easy access to rare earth elements and, precious metals and minerals
That's
and all
right.
that. But
Correct.
before we get into the denuclearization discussion, I just want to criticize the neocons because that's what this show is about at the end of the day. And when I say neocons, I mean neolibs too. I mean the pro-war progressives, quote unquote. I mean anyone who's just really, criticizing Trump for, trying to conduct diplomacy. And I want to start out by just saying, are you telling me in 1944 FDR should not have showed up to Yalta because Stalin was a butcherous tyrant? Okay, come on.
Yeah.
That's what you sound like. Are you telling me Nixon should have spit in Mao's face and canceled the meeting and just completely closed off China, which, at the end of the day, U.S. opening up a relation with China really helped us, quote unquote, win the Cold War? And do you think Reagan should have, just called it off with Gorbachev and Iceland? I think it was Iceland where they had their 86 summit. But are you telling me all these great historical moments shouldn't have happened because these people are less than desirable? I mean, all throughout the U.S. history, we have been associating with less than desirable people, even to the foundation of this country. We associated with France and Spain, absolute monarchies. We were trying to build a republic based on liberal values. I mean, well, actual liberal values. What that meant back in the 18th century is very different than what it means today. But that's beside the point. They sided with the Russian Empire. So. And then you go throughout it, our relationship with, countries like Saudi Arabia, our relationship with countries like Israel, who can't stay out of war, for longer than 6 months. Our relationship with, name any dictatorship, any tyrant we have supported throughout the Cold War. I mean, Look at, again, that's what diplomacy is. It's siding with less than desirable people. Because you know why? The world will never be this great neoliberal democratic paradise that some people want to try to sell you. You're going to have to associate with total assholes. I apologize for the profanity if that offends anyone. I try to keep it to a minimum, at least on this show. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. And another criticism, scathing criticism I have of these neocons is they're saying, oh, Trump looks weak. He's going with all the concessions. Really now? You got North Korea to pledge the denuclearization, which, again, we'll get into that discussion. We'll get into what that exactly means. You got him to release prisoners. You got him to stop testing nukes. You got him to talk to South Korea. And in exchange, we canceled some, military training exercises next year. And we'd agreed to pull some troops out of South Korea. Who do you think got the better deal here? Is it us who, agreed to do a few things that at the end of the day were inconsequential for our nation as a whole? Or is it North Korea who, in a way, is sacrificing quite a bit of its sovereignty for reintegration? They're acting like, Kim won today. If Kim won today, I'm glad he won today, because if this is a Kim victory, this has looked like a pretty good world and pretty good opportunities for peace and prosperity. That's all I can say about this.
Yeah, it's certainly the best American defeat ever, if it was a defeat.
Yeah,
I mean, these people are arguing. They're arguing in bad faith. That's all this is. These people are outraged, and they have been in outrage for 2 years since Trump's victory. They're just not going to stop it. At least we know they're not sincere about it. And hot take, but it could be that a situation historically arose after a culmination of 60 plus years, wherein an individual elected president of the United States figures out, or with help of his administration figures out how to resolve, or at least change the situation in a positive way in Korea. And yes, it does involve that the American flag should stand next to the evil dictator flag of North Korea. It's preposterous. Like you say, they already made all these concessions. What is he supposed to do? I mean, if he continued doing the war drills, it's very conceivable they would have said, after all that Kim has conceded to, Trump is still doing the war drills. It's bad diplomacy. They've already bought into that. It's bad diplomacy, and then they rationalize it afterwards.
Yeah, and so, I actually see that we're, surprisingly enough, an administration has learned from our mistakes. They're looking at what we did in Libya, concession after concession. We still keep up with the pressure on Gaddafi until we eventually decide to kill the guy. And, similar case with Iraq. Now Saddam Hussein, even though I'm a non-interventionist, I can't say I would have shed a tear if the Iraqi people or the Iranian regime or, anyone else would have killed him. I just oppose the fact that America had to pour lives and resources, and I can't say I really was necessarily fond of the guy, but he made several concessions too, and we still, deposed him. We still got rid of his regime and outright executed him. We made him look like a martyr in the process. I don't know why, but yeah, we're actually learning from our mistakes for once. We're making a deal. We're following through with it. We're making concessions of our own. And, things generally seem warm and friendly to the point where, did Bill Clinton or George Bush ever meet with Saddam? Did, Bush or Obama ever meet with, I think Hillary Clinton did meet with Gaddafi a few months, so maybe not necessarily too good of an example, but I think the audience understands what point I'm trying to convey here. Seldom do we actually meet with these people, listen to their grievances. Of course, we're going to pummel them in the end, whether that be, diplomatically or militarily, which, I hope it's the former rather than the latter. But at the end of the day, this has been one of the greatest things that happened in American foreign policy, I say, since the 50s, since the weird, sort of peace we had under Eisenhower, nobody really wanted to strike first, but we were still, strong militarily, which, I would describe as my ideal foreign policy for anything. But like I said, it's hilarious to watch, number one, these never-Trumper, neoconservatives, so-called Republicans come out and say, oh, this is so awful, because they always talk about how we need peace through strength, we need to be like Reagan, we need to put diplomacy before we go to war, but then if we go to war, we really got to do it. Again, we put diplomacy first the time, they're still complaining about how Trump looks weak. And another criticism I have for these progressive, for these lefties and these liberals, is these are the same people who were okay when Obama visited Cuba in 2015. Which, you know what? Again, I don't condone the Cuban regime. I'd say that as qualifier for anyone out there who would want to make an issue out of this. I don't support what's happening in Cuba, but I generally supported Obama visiting there. I supported that in concept. Now, in terms of negotiations, actually meeting with Castro, I don't think he conducted himself very well. I think he made himself look kind of weak and willing to give up more concessions than especially Trump. But again, on paper, I support the meeting with what is the Castro, Raul Castro, the Castro in power now.
Right.
Yeah, I support that. And by the same token, I support Trump meeting with North Korea. Like I said, I think he conducted himself a lot better. I think he really showed Kim that we're the United States. I think it's kind of necessary in Asia. I'm not necessarily a fan of this jingoistic or bellicose attitude, but I think when it comes to negotiating with countries like these, you need to say, we're America, we're stronger than you, we're better than you, we're the alpha dog, and you're going to listen to us. And I think Trump did a very good job at that today while remaining civilized. So all I can really say about today, in terms of the, criticism about this is purely partisan. The people who oppose this, it's number one, because they don't like Trump, and number two, because they're bloodthirsty neocons. Let's not, mince words here. So if you have any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would agree. We should remember that Reagan's first meetings with Gorbachev did not go well, and it took many years. And this too might take many years. It's just the first meeting. I mean, I was watching France 24, and although they stressed it was the first meeting, they had to keep reiterating that there's no real binding agreement here. There's no even though all these extraordinary signs on the part of both Trump and Kim had already
South Korea
occurred.
And China, for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people there are genuinely. I don't think war is going to break out there. First of all, the war is not going to break out in North Korea. It's not going to happen. There's too many people. There's too many countries there that are invested in a prosperous Asia. And this isn't like Libya, and it's not like Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, Libya and Iraq have China.
It probably has to deal with a small Middle Eastern nation that is the greatest democracy of the Middle East not being in close proximity. I'm just saying. So I don't think it's going to go the same way. They're not going to oust him. There will be intrigue, there will be infiltration. No, I'm not going to be happy that McDonald's and Globo Homo will try to find a place in North Korea. However, this isn't going to be Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah, and like I said, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi didn't have China and Russia supporting him. The only reason Assad's still in power is because Russia marginally supported him. Keep in mind how how really insignificant in terms of the way the U.S. supports other certain countries is compared to the way Russia supports Syria during the war. But again, this is a different theater. That's aside the point. But yeah, North Korea has guarantees of the fact where it's going to, completely piss away the U.S.-Chinese relationship if we try to take any actions against Kim Jong-un. I think we've maneuvered ourselves in a position where, yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're in this position, but we can't really go to war at this point, especially after the summit. And considering the fact, Kim Jong-un accepted Donald Trump's invitation to visit D.C. on an official state visit, we're probably going to see more progress, probably going to see some more substantial treaties. Now, I want to close the show, last 10 minutes or so, with the talks of denuclearization. Now, you've been hearing ever since May or so, Kim Jong-un is willing to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. He's willing to give up his arms. And there's been some overreactions on both sides here. You've been the sides here that, oh, he's never going to give up his nukes. Look at that. And then you have the people there who say he shouldn't give up his nukes. Look what happened to Gaddafi, which we had just had discussion about why that's comparing apple to oranges here. But denuclearization to the Western world, to the United States, what it means is we expect Kim to ship off his nukes to France or wherever, some other neutral Western country, and just dismantle them and turn them into atomic energy and use them for nuclear power plants. Denuclearization to Kim and probably to China means it's going to be a slow and steady process where we're going to dismantle them one at a time, but keep on giving you side eye to make sure you aren't planning anything while we slowly dismantle these. And we're just kind of back away, lay down the gun very slowly, make sure you aren't gonna, draw yours from your holster and try to, shoot us on sight. So if there's going to be denuclearization, I think it's going to be more so on North Korea's terms, at least in terms of that, where it's going to be a slow and steady process. Now, I believe with the new direction North Korea has taken, especially with its improved relationship with South Korea, which I never thought I'd say that sentence, it's going to have some will to at least dismantle some nuclear weapons because they want to be integrated with their brothers in the South. They also don't want to enrage China. I mean, they don't want to enrage the U.S. Completely scrap all the progress we made. And even the Russians are starting to warm up to them more after the denuclearization. Like I said, Putin has reached out to the North Koreans basically during the summit and said, "Oh yeah, you're less of a pariah anymore, so I guess we can associate with you now." And like I said, we'll probably see more whenever Kim Jong-un visits D.C., which again is a giant leap. It may not seem like anything because leaders visit other leaders' countries all the time. Well, number one, we got to address. So there's a couple points here. Number one, and again, Asian culture, Asian politics, it's like going to someone's home. It's a sign of respect. You're willing to be humbled, be treated as a guest there, and willing to indulge your host to an extent. Number two, ever since he's taken office, Singapore has been the first time he's really left North Korea. This has been the first major time. And, the reason he didn't leave North Korea even, to visit Beijing is the fact he thought, somebody was going to arrest him, blow his head off, kidnap him, something. It was not going to end well with him if he left, pre-2018. But now he's reached the point.
You could see actually he looked kind of unsettled at times with Trump.
I mean, I would be, but you've reached the point where he's decided, oh yeah, I have enough trust. I have enough trust to go to the United States. Out of all places, our main enemy, the country we've been threatening to destroy for the past, 50 years, the country we've been threatening to turn to ash, turn all their allies to ash. I'm going to go there on good terms, and I'm going to sit down with their leader, who no less than a year ago was threatening to drop a nuke directly on my palace, and we're going to be there on good terms, and we're going to make some negotiations. So I think that's amazing, and I see Trump, especially with his business in mind, trying to, weasel in there and make some deal around those minerals and rare, metals, which I do support. If we can, get it on that market, if we can, get that relationship in with North Korea early, take advantage of it before any of these other countries can, I say we do it because, the only way the world's been getting these, minerals and materials has been through China, who, with their monopoly on it, basically controls the price. So when you have multiple competing nations, it's going to drive the price down, which is going to be good. So, this is stuff that goes in computers, cell phones, and I mean, funny enough, maybe 10 years on, North Korea will be the number one producer of computer chips. Imagine that future. But if you have any thoughts on the quote unquote denuclearization and where you see U.S., North Korea, Chinese relations going from this point on after this, I would say, stunning success of a summit. Now, I know I've been a lot of, pretty much Trump partisan today, but again, today has been a stunning success, even the point where a lot of people were blackpilled on him, especially after Syria, are starting to come right back around to him.
Yeah, my take on the denuclearization of North Korea is this. North Korea was never going to attack anyone, not least of all South Korea with nuclear arms. This was never going to happen. The whole point of the nuclear program was, long before it bared any fruit, was a way to extort money from South Korea. And that also was because America had the longest sanctions on any given country in modern times. So the so-called nuclear program of North Korea was really a way to survive. And South Korea paid yearly in the hundreds of millions but I think even they knew it wasn't likely to happen. So it was an extortion racket, but it was an extortion racket really to survive because of the kind of isolation America placed North Korea in. So I never once in my life have believed that North Korea is going to nuke Tokyo or San Francisco or Seoul. It's just outrageous.
Now, I have a similar but divergent take on that. Now, I think North Korea, their state ideology under the Juche, which is their variant of communism, has basically been a reunification of all Korean peoples under communism. So I believe the entire point of the nukes was where they could, march in South Korea and they would surrender, out of fear of nuclear hellfire and try to keep the world powers out of it. So, I saw it, kind of like when, you see like in the action movies, room full of people, they pull a pin on a grenade and say, I'll let go of it. I saw it as always that kind of move from North Korea. I figured that's what they were going for. But I think what you said has some merit.
I mean, if all the players were really thought that North Korea would do something like that, then it wouldn't make sense. Bill Clinton giving them plans on blueprints for
Yeah. I mean,
nuclear plants in the 90s. I mean, that just makes no sense. That just makes no sense.
North Korea was a laughing
Again,
stock even amongst liberals, until Trump took office and actually started doing something about it. So, I mean, nobody took North
right.
Korea seriously, even when they tested the nukes. Kim Jong Un was just that funny fat guy who thinks he has all the power in the world.
Right. I mean, I don't even know if I buy that narrative. I mean, a lot of this is, a lot of it is this kind of Soviet tradition and that saturates the way. If you've ever seen videos from North Korea of, their public news television services, part of that is that, is a Soviet model, um, but really no, everything from the Clinton nuclear power plant blueprints to Dennis Rodman going there. These are all very bizarre narratives that are there to hide basically a buffer state, basically a state that's been heavily sanctioned and a people that's been divided for over half a century. And like I say, and there's too many big, very, very big, important players in that region of the world, and war was always out of the question.
Yeah.
There's,
These people
there's
are,
just too much of a domino effect. If they go to war, of course, America will be dragged in, which means China will be dragged in, which means Russia will be dragged in, which means Japan. It's just such a hot spot. It's where the new emerging market is. There's just, I don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think basically, after the Cold War, war on the Korean Peninsula was really out of the question. No matter how much either side, projects, both of them are going to say their goal is reunification. They may do like some minor moves towards that, but again, their goal up until recently was like, oh, we're just gonna shake our fists at each other and broadcast propaganda. Which side note, I know this happened a while ago. Both sides took down the propaganda broadcasts, which again, that's great. And yeah, it's gonna be weird to see an actually demilitarized DMZ. But, when do you
Yeah,
think the peace parade's gonna be? Because that's gonna be definitely an interesting event.
I think Kim should have a bargaining chip. Demilitarize the border if you promise no K-pop in Northern Korea. If he can do that, I'm
That
K-pop is, I just don't understand it, but
I mean,
it would be
I,
amazing, of course.
I
If
think out
that
of all the things that the North Korean people have suffered, I think that would probably be the worst.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It would be the worst. Just go on Twitter and check it out. I mean,
Oh
that's
no,
not fair.
I've seen it in the periphery, and it's like I just want to like scrub my eyes, just go have a nice drink, forget about what I just saw. But yeah, I mean, but no, honestly, I hope North Korea. I mean, Asian countries have been better, at least in the sense of not like getting this weird neoliberal, I say cancer. Yeah, the point where their culture is just completely degraded. I mean, I'm surprised. K-pop. I mean, that's the worst thing. So there is that. I mean, when that's the worst thing about your culture, I think you've kind of lucked out. As bad as it may be, but yeah, I have generally positive feelings. Ending the show. don't worry, guys. Rev will be back next week. Of course, if you, GSP, would like to join us for any future episodes, just tell us. We'll get you on. Hopefully, I mean, next week's episode probably isn't going to be as, exciting, especially after the, other, the past 2 episodes you've co-hosted with me, which I mean, that's okay. You have your up weeks and your down weeks, but yeah, it's been nice for tuning in. If you guys like the broadcast, of course, share it around, hit that like button. YouTube has been suppressing political content again, and with the upcoming midterms. Of course, you can find all our links in the description below. I'll add your Twitter, GSP, and
thank you very much.
If you want to plug anything else, do that, and if not, I will close out the show.
No, that's it. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
So I will see you guys probably next time on Wednesday, and goodbye.